Did you know that in a bee colony, a male bee, half of the binary of life, does only one thing, two things. He eats honey, and he flies out of the colony at a particular time and circles around in a particular area, hoping to intercept a young queen on her mating flight. That's all he does. And then he's back to the colony, and he just consumes. So why on earth would I be making a video about what a tradesman, what a craftsman could learn from honeybees? It's because they are a very complex little society that is very mysterious because so much of it happens in the dark. But when you sort of understand something about what's going on in that little complex society, there are things we should copy. There are assumptions we should reconsider. There are behaviors that we should avoid. There are understandings we can sort of intercept about our own lives, our own societies, our own happiness that will be informed by either emulating or avoiding the example of the honeybee. Now here's an interesting thing. When we collect a swarm, right, when a swarm is collected and it's put into a box that smells like home and seems the right size and has comb already drawn out. We've done a video about that. When the bees determine that this is a place to set up housekeeping, they stop being a collection of individuals who are anxious about where we're going to live and begin to tend to the welfare of the group by some number will get on the edge of this new box, and they will hold on to the edge of the box, and they will point their rear ends up in the air and fan their wings, and they are exuding a "this is home" pheromone. Of their own free will and choice, they take responsibility for summoning those who could be lost. Now, that is something we could learn from. If there is something that we can do to point out to those around us, look, here is a safe place. Here is a safe way. Here is a productive method. Here is security in uncertain times. Why wouldn't we as humans do that instead of metaphorically raising the drawbridge, fencing out the other, and consigning ourselves to what? Living in a prison of our own development? So for those of us who are on the left-hand side of the spectrum, if honeybees seem a case for socialism, let's think a little more carefully and realize that it only works because every soul in that bee colony, is dedicated to the same outcomes. They are dedicated to the colony thriving. They are dedicated to the colony getting its share or more than its share of the resources in the middle of where they live. They are absolutely dedicated to the death, to making sure that nobody harms in any way the queen or their home base. Now, that begins to sound like a family, doesn't it? It's much more like a well-regulated, and when I say regulated, I mean ordered family than a government structure. Because they are all, after all, sisters and brothers. They do, after all work for or focus their best efforts on the sustenance and productivity of the queen. I think more than anything else, honeybees are a model for our families. One of the metaphors for us as humans from bees is that in a bee colony, there's a certain specific number of jobs. I don't know if the number is 5 or 7 or 8, but it's not a large number. I mean, there's building of cells, there's installing propolis, wax and propolis and royal jelly and honey, and what else? Bees can make about 4 or 5 different substances. And as soon as a larva emerges from the cell where it has been propagated and fed, as soon as it comes out, it goes to work. Things have to be clean. The colony has to be cleaned out, swept out. Cells have to be built. Beeswax has to be generated. Propolis has to be put into place. Nurse bees have to feed and tend the eggs, the pupa, the larva. They have to meet their needs. The queen has to be protected and guided and fed and cleaned, and encouraged. There is, of course, separate from all those inside the colony, there are the forager bees, the experienced, the strongest, at their prime, female worker bees who take the terrible chance of leaving that colony. What a terrible chance, and flying out into the great unknown. As a proportion of distance, I don't know how far it would be from home, but they have to fly to get there, and they have to take instructions from somebody who has already been to that place. And they rotate those tasks automatically and seamlessly in order for the colony to thrive. Man, can you feel the encouragement for us? That we are willing to rotate tasks, that we are willing to take our turn at cleaning, at feeding, at nursing, at foraging, at defending, at every needful thing. In our families, in our communities, we're willing to take our turn. Now there's another thing that honeybees teach. When a colony is established and has a place to call home, the bees will defend it ferociously. There are guard bees at the door, at the entrance, at all times, to defend against wasps, to defend against other honeybees who want to come in and steal their stores, to defend against people like me who want to come along and mess with them, or Kelly. If they just knew Kelly was looking out for their best interests, they would welcome her with open arms. But the bees have decided that there is something worth dying for. Because when a bee stings a mammal, the barbs on the stinger embed in a mammal's skin, and the stinger and everything attached to it inside the bee pulls out when the bee leaves, and the bee dies. Now, it's not the same when they sting another bug. But a bee can teach us that there are some things that are worth killing and dying for. Now, on the other hand, when the bees are swarming, when they're looking for a new home, when they don't have anything to defend, but they just have distance to cover and an urgent need to find where it will be that they will thrive, they're not defending against anything or anyone. They are vulnerable. And unless you purposely agitate them, they are very docile. You can put your hand into the festoon, into the swarm itself, and nobody's going to sting you because they're not on guard. They are curious and they're looking. What does that say for humans? That we don't always have to be defensive. That maybe curiosity and an inclination to know more about our surroundings will reduce the number of times we're prone to sting. Maybe this is related to the bumper sticker that I love so much, and I'd love to get one, that says, "Wag more, bark less," right? What a classy little bumper sticker. Wag more, bark less. Maybe honeybees could do that. I don't know. But there are a world of lessons from honeybees. There's the lesson of being willing to take guidance from someone who has been there, done that, got the t-shirt. I'm thinking of the forager bees that went out at such risk to themselves and discovered a new patch of clover, a new patch of blackberry blossoms, a new fill in the blank. And they loaded up with pollen and nectar, and they made the heavy laden flight back, and they land at the door into the colony. And they don't just go in and deposit the nectar and the pollen, but they begin to try to communicate to the other foragers, "Hey, go there, go there." I know that there's resource there. Maybe we learn that when we stumble on something good, whether it's a career or a neighborhood or a church or a school or something that feeds us and has the potential of providing sustenance for the others of our type, that we say, "Hey, go there. You will find something in this place that will help us all." All right, so honeybees and the trades. Honeybees epitomize mentoring, right? They epitomize, do it like this. They epitomize, I am on this task and you can do it just like me. Honeybees also epitomize the fact that In construction, we think of totem poles, right? You're at the bottom of the totem pole. Well, guess what? If there is no one at the bottom of the totem pole, there's no totem pole. And in the colony, if there's no one cleaning out the cells, then you've got no place for the queen to lay her eggs. And the worker that is cleaning out the cells and cleaning out the colony is no more dissatisfied with her lot in life than the forager is, who's taking all the chances and maybe getting all the glory. Maybe we can learn that if we are just starting out in any of the trades, an apprentice electrician, apprentice plumber, a laborer on a concrete crew, maybe we can realize that we are filling a vital responsibility in the same way that the newly hatched honeybee worker is filling a vital responsibility in simply doing what she can do where she is. That's one of the lessons of the honeybee. So we've talked about defending and that bees are on guard and that if you mess with them, you're going to be sorry, okay? But we haven't drilled down on the fact that the honeybee's life is dedicated to preparation. Did you know that in a honeybee's life, she will make or be responsible for making 1/12 of 1 teaspoon of honey? Now think of that when you were just slathering the honey on your pancakes. Each bee spent her life making 1/12. But if each bee didn't do that, there would be inadequate preparations for winter. And if there are inadequate preparations for the winter that will surely come, the whole colony dies. Now, contractors, we are notorious for the first time we have money in the bank and accounts receivable that we find ourselves at the car dealer buying a new truck. There's nothing about buying a brand new truck for a brand new contractor that can be considered preparation. The winter will come. Work will slow down between the middle of December and the end of January. And you know what? That truck payment still has to be made. So all these things must be done in wisdom. But as tradesmen, we should think carefully about if there's no one at the bottom of the totem pole, there is no totem pole. If you start at the bottom of the totem pole and you're interested in climbing up to other responsibilities, you will if you prepare yourself to do it. And wherever you are and whatever you're doing, you have to be thinking about the preparation for your responsibility, which is your family, and preparing for the winter months, which are surely going to come. Now, for the bees who are making propolis, propolis is glue. Propolis is caulking. And there are bees whose duty for some period of time is just to make propolis and stuff it into every crack in their surroundings. They will glue the lid on the hive. They will glue the frames into place. They will glue shut the cracks in the oak tree if that's where they're living. And if a mouse gets in there to eat their honey and they sting that mouse to death, which they certainly will, they don't want a rotting mouse carcass inside their environment. And the inside of a bee colony, by the way, is about as sanitary an environment as you're going to find in nature. You know what they do to that dead mouse? They encase it in propolis. The propolis crew pulls off of gluing down the lid, and they all go to work in mummifying and wrapping and entombing that mouse in propolis, which becomes a hard, solid, strong sarcophagus for a dead mouse. And he does not contaminate the rest of the environment. Now, I don't know at what point you get off the propolis crew and you get onto the foragers or you get onto the nursing crew. I don't know. But the bees know, and that's why the bees prosper. All right, swarming. You've heard me talk about swarming. You've seen Kelly talking about swarming. Swarming is when the colony gets so populated, it's so big, that there's just not room. And so about 50% of the bees and the old queen on a given day at a given signal fly away. And they follow the old queen until they find some sort of new residence, leaving the best chance for survival with those that remain and the young queen, because she's fertile, she's laying eggs like crazy, or she can, and so it ensures the survival of the larger colony. Now, one of the things that bees are up against in determining how much room there is and how many stores they need, stores are the honey that they lay up, is that they are up against how much nectar the flowers produce. So I'm going to hold in abeyance the idea that half of the colony flies off and they either get help or they find a place. And I'm just going to concentrate on the idea of how much they make for the work that they do, their wages. I mean, what it is that the bee brings home from that arduous and dangerous flight. The amount of honey that a colony will produce in a year depends not on whether or not they're ambitious, and not really on how many blooms are within, a close distance to the colony, but it depends on when the water comes, when the rains come, or if the irrigation happens, because around here, the bees make their living off of blackberry blossoms and poison oak blossoms. And if the rain comes at the right time, so there's water in the soil, when the blackberries are putting out their blossoms, then the plant can afford a lot of energy, a lot of moisture into the blossoms to make extra nectar to entice the pollinators to propagate. But on the other hand, if the water didn't come at the right time, then the blossoms are dry and there's not much nectar there. And it doesn't matter how many times the bees fly back and forth, they're not going to make any money. Now that can be the same for tradespeople. You might find yourself in a place where it's been a long time since the rains have come and the blossoms are all dry and wages are low, or cost of living is going up, or fill in the blank. There may be some set of circumstances that make it impossible for you to make the money you have to make. The lesson of the honeybee is, don't be afraid to swarm. Don't be afraid to pack your people up and head to greener pastures, because sometimes, you know what? The other side of the fence is greener. The honeybee teaches us that. Okay, so the white boxes that you see with bees in them, those are called Langstroth hives. And they were developed, I think, in the late part of the 19th century, and bee space was understood, and 8, 9, and 10 frame boxes were understood. Yes, yes, yes. And the bees are very well ordered in there. They make their 6-sided hexagonal cells, which waste no space and are very strong, and they build them out the right distance, and it works great. Now in nature, they are a little more, in fact, way more chaotic in what they build, but they still build from a particular perspective to perfection. They build these lobes, and the lobes can attach to anything, and the lobes are strong, and they use all the available space, and they just, bees do it right. Now sometimes they get sideways and sometimes they are just bugs after all. But a bee doesn't just work. A bee does the best work she can. And queens don't just lay eggs periodically. A queen lays all the eggs she can. And the drones, they do what they must, they do what they want, and they are pretty expendable. So fellas, let's take all the lessons we can from the bee. Build as well as we can. Fill the space that we find ourselves in with every good thing. Share those good things. Defend when we must and welcome when we can. Understand that those young ones that need to be nursed and nurtured and cleaned and prepared are the future. Understand that there will come a time when we will have outlived our usefulness. And as men, let's be careful that we don't put ourselves in the situation where she would just as soon chew your wings off and kick you out of the nest because you haven't produced a day's work in months. Let's not do that. Let's make sure that our contribution to the colony is strong and positive, and our children will thank us for it if we are so lucky as to live long enough for our children to be able to say thank you. Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.